Well, tell us your name and where you're from, how you grew up, and how you ended up in Evansville.
My name's Stan Levco, born in Boston. I grew up in both, started off in Boston and then moved to Maine when I was about 6 and spent about 6 to 16 in Maine, then moved back to suburb of Boston. Graduated in Brookline, Massachusetts, and went to the University of Massachusetts, graduated there in 1968, and came to Indiana University Law School in fall of 68 and graduated in 71.
What year were you born?
1946. I was born one day after the president-elect Donald Trump. He is one day older than I am.
And what'd you study at UMass, was it?
UMass, yeah. I was an English major.
So what brought you to Indiana University?
You know, I tell people, and there's a little bit of truth to this, I was sitting in a bar on New Year's Eve watching Harry Gonzo in the Rose Bowl, the only time Indiana's probably ever been in the Rose Bowl. And I thought I'd like to go to a different part of the country. And I thought, I had hitchhiked around the South the summer before. I didn't like the South. The West seemed too far, so I thought I'd go to the Midwest. And if I went to the Midwest, I thought I ought to go to a Big Ten school, and it was just random. I thought about Ohio State, Illinois, and Indiana, and I watched Harry Gonzo. And what really did it was I just happened to, they had a recruiter that came out to UMass from IU. And, he said to me, where are you thinking? And I said, well, IU is my first choice. And he was just floored by that, that somebody in Massachusetts would have IU as their first choice. So I think that probably might have helped me get in.
So what year did you graduate from IU?
71.
And what'd you do after that?
Directly after that, I worked a little bit at Bob's Merrill in Indianapolis for maybe 6 months, a publishing company that did Burns statutes. And then I got a job in Posey County as the chief deputy prosecutor of Posey County, and also did a little civil work for maybe 3 years. And then I got appointed judge of a new Posey and Gibson County Court.
What brought you to Posey County?
Job. My credentials were somewhat lacking, and I was from the East, and it wasn't like I was a big find like any law firm would hire me. And it turned out my boss was blind. And
what was his name?
His name was Tom Rachel's, a really great guy. He blinded in World War II. So he was having trouble finding someone, who wanted to move to Posey County, and just finding somebody. So I was the one he found.
Did you have a private practice there as well?
A little private practice. Really didn't make very much money.
On your own?
No, with him.
Okay.
With him.
And what kind of work was that?
We didn't do that much. I did some divorces and some other whatever else came along. But we really, I'm guessing I made less than $5,000 my first year and probably didn't make much after that, more than that.
So you were appointed to a court position then?
They used to have a justice of the peace system, and they instituted a bunch of county courts around the state, and with misdemeanor and jurisdiction and what do you call it, small claims. And there were maybe half a dozen joint circuits because Posey County was so small. Posey and Gibson County had a joint circuit, and I got appointed joint judge of both circuits. There are a number of people applied, and I got, it was a question whether it was going to be the judge from Posey or Gibson County. There were a few candidates from Posey and a few from Gibson, and the judges from Posey and Gibson County had to decide. So it seemed like it would be a stalemate. You didn't know which one would get it. And when I got it, I thought, well, obviously I was the most qualified, and the judges got together and realized that I was clearly the best candidate, and that's why I got it. And years later, after I left Gibson County, one of the guys who was on the selection committee told me how I got it. They couldn't decide. They were, no one would give in, and finally they drew straws, and that's
Really?
how I became judge, yeah.
How long were you judge of that court?
I was appointed for 1 year, and then I got elected for 4 years, so I was judge for 5 years. Well, and they split the courts midway into my term. So I was judge of the joint court for the first 3 years, and then solely judge of the Posey County Court for the next 2 years.
When you were you elected by citizens of both counties?
Both counties, and it was a cumulative vote. but they were at that time they were strongly Democratic counties, so I won pretty easily in both counties.
And so then you were in that court for how long?
Well, I was in the joint court for 3 years and 2 more years just in the Posey County Court,
And
so
then
a total of 5.
Then what?
Then I moved to Evansville and became head of what was called the Career Criminal Unit. It was a federally funded program where it was just like a dream job where the idea was to just go after the most serious criminals and not literally never plea bargain with them, but essentially don't make deals other than, really strong deals and just go after the worst of the worst. And that's what I did for a couple of years. And then the money ran out for that.
And were you with the prosecutor's office?
Yeah, I
during
was
that?
with the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor's Office. It was under the auspices. So I was a deputy prosecutor, but I had special responsibilities.
Who was prosecutor then?
Jeff Lance.
Okay, go ahead.
And then after that, the money ran out, but I got into the prosecutor's office as a deputy, and I also went into private practice with Steve Barber and John Hamilton for a couple more years. And then I ran for prosecutor in 1990 and got elected.
After you worked for another prosecutor besides Jeff Lance, did you not? Or did you?
Yeah, I worked for Pigman. Yeah, I just lost about 8 years there, I think. Yeah. I worked for Pigman for 8 years, I guess. And sometime during that time, I don't know how long I was in private practice, maybe 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years. And then when I ran, I know I got elected in 1990. So
Were you a part-time prosecutor, deputy prosecutor, and had a civil practice also? Or?
yeah, I started off. I did the career criminal thing for maybe 3 years. That was full time, and then I did full time for I don't know, maybe another 3 years, and then did private practice and part time for maybe 3 or 4 years. As I think about it, it was a total of 10 years between being judge and being elected prosecutor.
And this was during the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, it was literally that decade. I finished my term as judge in 1980. It probably would have been December 31st, 1980, I'm guessing. And then I ran for prosecutor in 1990 and began on January 1st, probably 1991.
And where was Bob Pigman at that time?
He, when I ran for prosecutor, he decided to go into civil practice, and he became a deputy for me for a couple of years, and then went into civil practice full time.
So then how long were you deputy, or were you the prosecutor?
I was
Vanderburgh
prosecutor
County?
for 20 years. I served 5 terms, 5 4-year terms,
And that was a full-time prosecutor?
full time, yeah.
And so what type of civil work did you do when you were a part-time civil practitioner?
Yeah, I didn't do much. I mean, I did. I was a mediocre civil attorney at best. I did divorces. That was probably the single most common thing I did, and whatever else came along, I did a little Social Security, I guess. A little, just whatever came along.
Was your heart in this criminal practice?
Yes, I mean, it was a twofold thing. My heart was there, and my ability was there. I mean, I don't know whether I would have hired myself as a civil lawyer. I guess I might have. I mean, I think I maybe did an adequate job on what I did, but I didn't think I was particularly good as a civil lawyer.
So who are some of the people that worked for you in the prosecutor's office?
Well, Pigman eventually came over. He was always a deputy. Now that I think about it, when he was just chief deputy for the first 3 months, and then he was a deputy for maybe 10 years before he became judge. Bob Zoss was one of the better trial attorneys. Rich DeMoore, Doug Brown was my chief deputy. Jonathan Parkhurst, Maggie Lloyd, a number of them. One time when I left the prosecutor's office, and I don't have the numbers, and I didn't even know the word. What is it? Diaspora? Do you know?
No.
It was some sort of ancient thing he talked about that the influence that I had, that I don't know how many, 10, 12 of my deputies either became judge or prosecutors or chief deputies somewhere else.
I assume you tried cases when you were prosecutor?
One of the main reasons I ran for prosecutor, when I was with Pigman, I was although I wasn't his chief deputy, I was his go-to guy for the big trials if he didn't want to try him. Basically, it was he'd get first choice, and either he'd try him or we'd try him together. And then if he was too busy to try a big case, then I'd try it. And really, the main reason I ran is I wanted to keep trying cases and trying the good, interesting cases, and I knew the only way to guarantee that was if I was prosecutor, I would be able to assign myself to him. So yeah, I would maybe an average 1 or 2 a year that interested me. Mostly murder cases, but not all.
Are there any particular that stand out to you as most memorable?
Yeah. Now, over the years, in different times, I tried one in Mount Vernon. My first really big case was a case, a guy by the name of Lester Niehaus, and we convicted him. I really had only tried a couple of cases before then, and this was really a major case where we convicted a guy by matching his teeth marks to a woman's breast that we cut off and had compared. So that was my first really major case. I tried another case in Bloomington, a special prosecutor. His name was Robert E. Lee, and he decapitated a woman and cut out all her body parts, and we wound up convicting him on matching the garbage bags that he put her body in with the garbage bags that we found in his apartment. But my biggest case in Evansville was a case of Patrick Bradford, who's a police officer who killed his girlfriend and then burned her body. I tried, also with Bob Pigman, I tried the Donald Wallace case that was venue to Terre Haute. That was a quadruple homicide, and that was a pretty big deal. So those are 4 of my bigger cases that I tried around here.
When you were a prosecutor, were you active at all in state or national prosecutor organizations? Or?
I was on the board of the Indiana Prosecutors Association. In the last maybe 8 years, I was prosecutor. I was the Indiana's representative to the national prosecutors. So I was quite active statewide in the state prosecutor organization, and ultimately became active in the the nation, country prosecutors organization. You know, and a couple of those people now, I think at least 3 of the people that I served on the board with are United States senators.
Really?
Yeah.
Who are they?
Let me see. She just got elected in California, Kamala Harris, who I think may be president if somebody's watching this 20 or 30 years from now. And what's her name from Minnesota? Amy Klobuchar. And then what's her, Claire McCaskill.
Didn't you tell me that once you met Attorney General Janet Reno?
Oh, yeah. I was a delegate to the 2004 Democratic Presidential Convention. And I just happened to meet her at the convention. I think she was a delegate too, and introduced myself. And when I did, she said she was very interested in exonerations. And could she talk to me about it sometime? I said, well, yeah, you can talk to me about it anytime. And as a result of it, we were having a statewide prosecutor convention in Evansville either that summer, maybe the next summer, and she came here. She's a very just gracious woman. She just died last week. She's just a really nice woman and very, she went around when she came here, she came to my office and, introduced herself and talked to everybody. It embarrassed me. She was like nicer to the people in my office than I was, but she was really quite a woman.
So you're a Democrat?
I am a Democrat.
Were you active in local politics when you were a prosecutor?
Not only to the extent that I had to be because I was one of the top party officials, but I think everybody said to me, and I did not take it as an insult, that I was one of the worst politicians they'd ever seen. I was a Democrat, but as far as I was concerned, that had nothing to do with me as prosecutor. The most it would possibly be is if some Democratic official had somebody he wanted me to interview for a secretarial position, I would consider it. That was not, I can't, right now I'm trying to think, I'm sure I must have hired somebody that somebody recommended, but.
But you seem to have an interest in national politics. You went to the convention, right?
Well, I'm interested in it. I'm just not a good politician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've written too, haven't you?
Yeah.
During this period of time, and when did you start that? And tell us about that.
I started writing a satire column in college, and then I wrote a column for the Mount Vernon newspaper when I was there. Even while I was judge, I wrote a column. And then after a while, starting when I moved over here, after I became a deputy prosecutor, I think in 1980, I started writing essentially a weekly satire column. And I wrote it up until the time I got elected prosecutor. They wouldn't let me write it anymore. I wrote a few articles occasionally while I was prosecutor, but not much. And then once I lost the prosecutor thing 6 years ago, I've been writing. For a while, it was every other week. Now it seems like more like once a month.
You have any books?
I've written 2 books. The first was The Best of Stan Levco, and the second one was The Second Best of Stan Levco. And if I do another one, I guess it wouldn't be hard to figure out what that title would be.
Did you tell me once that you had an interest in comedy writing? I mean, writing as a professional?
Yeah, I don't know if I told you that, but I must have for you to ask that
did.
question. Yeah. As I look back on it, I mean, I'm very pleased with what I've done, but you always feel like you could do better. And I mean, if I look back on it, I think I might have given that a shot. I don't. I say I don't know if I'm good enough. I guess I know I'm good enough, but there are thousands and thousands of other people who are good enough. So I don't know whether I could have done it long enough to get the breaks and to have done it professionally or not.
So who were some of the lawyers, I assume mostly in the criminal field, that you had the most dealings with, or that you were impressed with or enjoyed working with? What were some of the names over those 20 years?
I mean, certainly, my deputies are the ones that, Doug Brown and, my staff. I like most of the people on my staff. As a defense attorneys, I like Terry Knopfsinger. Mike Keating, although we weren't close personally, I had a lot of respect for him as a defense attorney. And so Glenn Gramp was a very good defense attorney, although we were never close at all. And I never, Jack Davis and John Klaus, they were a little older than I am. I got to catch them at the end of their career, particularly John Klaus I only tried a couple cases with. Jack I tried a few more. But I'm really lucky to have had this profession, particularly as a trial attorney. I love doing it, and I really, for the most part, with few exceptions, really respect most of the other ones in the defense attorneys and respect what they do and enjoy watching what they do and trying to figure out if I can do it a little better than they do it.
Have you told me what made you decide to go to law school as opposed to something else?
No, I have not.
Will you please?
I wanted to be a lawyer. I did not want to practice law. I actually grew up, my uncle was a lawyer, and I grew up watching Perry Mason. And I thought if I ever practiced law, I'd become a defense attorney. But I never thought I was good enough. I didn't think I would be good enough to do that. I knew few lawyers actually were in the courtroom. But I just had this, if you could call it a drive, I don't know, that I needed to get a law degree. And I got my law degree, and I remember I went out to California to interview for a job on a newspaper because I wanted to be a satire columnist. That was my original kind of goal. And I remember sending out ads to the Los Angeles Times, I'm a lawyer, you got anything interesting for me to do? I mean, I got a few crackpot kind of responses. Shockingly, I didn't get hired by anybody as a result of that. So I went out there, for a week or two, I had a couple newspaper interviews and didn't get anywhere. And I thought, maybe I ought to practice law. Maybe I can make a living doing that.
Are you glad you did?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just really feel lucky. I mean, I think I became a very good prosecutor, but I started off, I wouldn't have guessed I would have become a very good prosecutor given how badly I did in law school and how badly I've always done in school and how little success I had before then. So, I mean, I think I was just lucky to get in the right place at the right time.
And so you were elected first in 1980, did you say?
No, I was elected
in 1990.
1990, yeah,
and then subsequent elections were when?
Every 4 years. And then I lost the election in 2010.
And since then, what have you been doing?
Well, I've been they got this thing called senior prosecutor. So I travel around the state, try some pretty interesting cases. I also teach trial advocacy at Indiana University Law School. It's fun. Well, it's actually not Indiana University Law School. It's a Maurer School of Law. It's ironic because for years I've been trying to get on the staff, and I always thought I could teach trial tactics, and I finally got on in maybe the summer of 2010, and I knew it was going to be kind of strange. I mean, I assumed I was going to get reelected, and I thought this is going to be a little strange teaching in Bloomington while I'm the full-time prosecutor, but the way I thought I'd do, I figured I'd only take a half day off each week, and I figured, I can do that. You're allowed, actually as prosecutor, it's not limited to how much vacation you could have, but had I been a deputy prosecutor, I would have been entitled to like 6 weeks vacation, so that I was not going to take more time off. I will say that I don't know that I worked particularly hard as a prosecutor, but I would say I took very few vacation days. Now, maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year, if that, when I could have easily, most of my staff was taking more. I don't say that meaning I was that hard a worker, but I say that meaning how much I liked the job. It was like, to me, going to work was not really working.
So how often do you go to Bloomington to teach that class?
Once a week, but it's just they call it the spring semester, but it's like January through May.
Over the years, have you noticed in particular any changes in the bar or the way lawyers practice or the tools that they have, or anything in particular comes to your mind that 30 years ago you wouldn't have imagined would be here today?
Well, I mean, the technology is obviously so different, although that doesn't, I have not kept up with technology. It's like, a lot of people can just push a button and research stuff, and that's not me, I'm not a good one to ask about how lawyers practice because I just know how criminal lawyers practice. I don't have much of a civil field.
Well, how has that changed? Vis-a-vis the public defender's office or defense attorneys or the type of cases? Have the type of cases changed over the years?
Certainly, yeah. You'd have way more child molestings. When I first started, I remember my boss, who was the prosecutor, almost ignoring it when there was a child molesting. I mean, I can remember, as I'm thinking back, I can remember divorce cases that we had where the spouse would come in and say that how the husband had molested the children, and that was just, part of the divorce argument, as opposed to we need to be filing a criminal charge here, or even that we got a conflict here as prosecutors that somebody's been molested. Now that's an extreme example. It's not like it was totally ignored, but it was not taken as seriously as it is now. And battery on women was taken far less seriously as it is now. And and of course, non-support now is, I think, way more deadbeat dads than we used to have.
How about the substance abuse cases?
Oh, yeah. And the biggest thing, I can remember, in those days we were prosecuting marijuana. I wouldn't say nobody went to jail for possession of marijuana, because they might have in the early days, but it was, small amounts of marijuana were taken pretty seriously in those days, whereas now, it would almost be ignored. And then you never heard of methamphetamine. So drugs were a way smaller part of the practice, and now it's a huge part.
Looking back, if a young person in high school or college came and talked to you about possibly wanting to be a lawyer, what would you tell them? As far as whether they should or shouldn't, and what advice you would give them if they wanted to pursue that course?
Yeah, I guess I can only tell them about my own experience, because if they wanted to tell me they want to be a lawyer to make a lot of money and how to do that, I didn't do that, And I don't, I hear different stories, pro and con, about, I think I've heard there's a lot of lawyer dissatisfaction. I mean, I can only say from my point of view as prosecutor, and I don't know if it would be the same as a defense attorney. I suspect not, but maybe. But I can just say as prosecutor, I loved it. It was I remember in a big case saying to my co-counsel, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. I mean, I can't believe they pay me to do this. I got a call from a friend of mine now that I'm doing this freelance, and he called me. It's been a couple of years now, and he said, "Listen, I got a really difficult case. Can you do me a favor and do it?" And I said, "Well, I'll do it, but what is it?" He says, "Well, they found this guy in the trunk of his car with his head cut off and his arms cut off." And I don't want me to make light of it because it's always a very serious thing. And I'm thinking, and you're going to pay me to do this? I get to try this guy and, put him in jail, hopefully for the rest of his life, and you're going to pay me to do this? So, for at least for me, being a trial prosecutor has been fun. It hasn't been work.
I would think then you would say that's the best part of the job that you had, right?
Yeah, the best. And, I used to say, I don't know if I made up this quote or not, but the best thing in the world is winning a jury trial. The second best is losing one. Not that I like to lose, and I particularly, the last one I lost was really difficult. But, the old Teddy Roosevelt quote about being in the arena. Yeah, I like the combat.
What was the thing you liked the least about being a prosecutor?
Well, for me, the worst was as the elected prosecutor having to fire people. I didn't enjoy that. I did it. I mean, I did what I thought I had to do. So, over 20 years, I don't know how many, but certainly way more than 10 and maybe even more than 20 that I fired. And, some of them were easy, some of them were really, really bad, but some of them were closer calls. And so that's probably, and beyond the firing, dealing with personnel, as prosecutor, for me, just the petty things. I tried to farm that out and have, other people on my staff deal with it, but just the petty personnel problems.
Did your staff grow over the years?
Intellectually?
No, in number?
Probably. I don't know if it doubled, but I was there 20 years. I know our caseload more than doubled, so I would guess it at least more than 50% over 20 years. I doubt that it doubled, but probably 50%.
As far as your personal life is concerned, you run, don't you?
I do run. I just finished a half marathon in Las Vegas 3 days ago. I'm running slower and slower and slower, and I don't know how.
What's the biggest run they made?
Well, I've run in the Boston Marathon a couple times now as a bandit. In order to supposed to run in the Boston Marathon, you have to qualify. I couldn't come close to it, but they encourage bandits. They don't discourage bandits. So I did it many, many years ago when it wasn't nearly as crowded. But first 3,000 or 4,000, it qualified, and you get in the back of the pack, and they don't try to kick you off. They accommodate you with bandits. You go here. And
So do you consider yourself retired?
I definitely didn't in the beginning. It's only the last couple of months I haven't been working as hard as I had. I would say that up until now, up until a few months ago, and it may change because what I had was I had a murder case set for the entire month of October and a murder case set for another one set for the entire month of November, and they both pled out, which made my schedule almost nothing. Whereas when I was prosecutor, if a murder case pled out, I had all kinds of things to do every day anyway. But now, if I had a jury trial set and it gets called off, it's too late really to set anything else. So the last couple of months I haven't been working as much. I don't really consider myself retired.
How does a senior judge procedure work?
Senior prosecutor?
Senior prosecutor, thank you.
Yeah, what happens is, because if you've been the elected or chief deputy for, I think, 12 years, you're eligible to be prosecutor. You file a thing that you're qualified, but in reality, people contact you and then you file it probably. But I could file. I think I've probably filed a few of them. Say I'm willing to be appointed prosecutor in certain counties, and then the judge just contacts you. And what generally happens is the judge legally is supposed to appoint you and does appoint you, but what generally happens is the prosecutor will recommend to the judge that he knows someone, because the judges have a hard time finding prosecutors to do these cases. So most of the ones I get appointed to are because I know the, well, I don't know about most. Maybe I'll go with half. Maybe half the ones I get appointed to is because I've been friends with the prosecutor and I know him. But some of the judges have heard about me, and a lot of it is if you try one case in that county, then you tend to get appointed again.
And these are typically where there are conflicts for the prosecutor? Or?
Yeah, it should be that there have been a few that the prosecutor really didn't have to get off on and he just wanted to, but mostly because they've got a conflict and shouldn't do it.
What different counties have you done that in?
Well, I'm doing one in Vanderburgh now, Harrison County, Crawford County, Clark County, Monroe County, Martin County, Lake County, LaPorte, St. Joseph. That's
So,
most. Scott County.
so you
a few
enjoy
others.
you must obviously enjoy the work then.
Yeah, I do. And it's different. I don't get to choose. I've got. When I was prosecutor, every case I tried, I wanted to try because I was the one who picked it. So if I didn't want to try it, and I can only think of one that I picked that I thought I don't want to do this anymore, and I gave it to someone else. So every time I'm trying a case as prosecutor, it's because I wanted it. A lot of these cases, I'm doing a favor to the judge or the prosecutor, and a lot of them are just messy and nasty. So whereas my caseload before is every case I was happy to be trying, now it's like half of them I think, God, I just would like to get this resolved in a way that's good for all the parties.
Haven't you also taught trial tactics in other places or with associations?
Well, nationally, I certainly did a lot locally. I mean, locally as in the state, for the Indiana prosecutors. I would tend to teach at least once a year for the Indiana prosecutors. Now I don't hardly ever. It's been a while since I've taught Indiana prosecutors. Although actually this year I did. Lake County has a thing every year that they have they have people come in, and I did speak a couple hours at the Lake County prosecutor's office this year. But I used to teach some nationally for the National District Attorneys Association, go around to like Santa Fe and New Orleans, and actually after I lost an election, there was a former prosecutor who knew me who was head of some Attorney General's Association, and he asked me to teach in Alaska, which was kind of fun.
And any particular subject that you concentrate on, or just generally trial tactics?
No, I've taught on just about everything. Well, it would be trial tactics, but sometimes it would be exclusively cross-examination. I teach on quite a bit. Cross-examination, opening statement, closing argument, jury selection. I do a lot of. I teach where I teach at the law school. They have the faculty will teach different topics to all the classes once a week, and we're each assigned to two different topics, and I do voir dire and cross-examination, and those are maybe two of my better ones.
Well, you've had experience with the Evansville Bar and the Evansville area and the lawyers and the Bar Association and folks around here and the profession. Do you have any overall observations, either positive or negative, about the practice of law as you experienced it in Evansville?
Yeah, I mean, but mine is insular. I don't know if insular is the right word, but it's just a little slice of it. And for the criminal bar, I've enjoyed it, and I like the people in it, and I like the judges. I will say that the judges here, I have gone around the state, and as a general matter, I don't think the attorneys here are better than the other attorneys in the state. I mean, I like them better because I know them, so I'm not sure whether they're friendlier, but that's a possibility. But I definitely think, as a whole, the judges are better here than most of the state. There've been, you know, one comes to mind now in 20 years that I didn't think was a very good judge, and I'm sure there's been a couple others here. But that's when you got 6 judges for 20 years. I mean, almost all the judges are pretty good here, pretty good or very good. Whereas I've tried cases in it's not unusual for me to try cases in other counties where I think, my God, where did they get this person? But, you know, even that would be the exception. It's just the exception happens way more often, it seems to me, in other counties than it does here.
Well, Stan, is there anything else you want to say at all for this interview that we haven't talked about already?
No, I just can't imagine how fascinating this is going to be to people in the year 2093, but...
Well, it will be more than you know, and thank you for doing this.
Okay, well, my pleasure.